Thank you, Megan. And now to Martin Fleck from the Physicians for Social Responsibility. Martin?
Well, greetings. Thank you, Marie. And thanks to everyone for tuning in on this afternoon to talk about a not 100% pleasant topic. I'm very excited for this chance to talk to Pax Christi members. And, you know, I have a saying which is that when the missiles fly, everyone will be a peace activist. And so that's why I want to say a very sincere thank you to Sister Megan and her colleagues for the work that they've done to call attention to nuclear weapons and help people to wake up so that we don't have to wait and pay attention now before the next city is destroyed. And so I'm going to thank you on the call even more once you get active. So I do have some slides that I'm going to share with you here. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. This is the big exciting thing that's happening these days. I'm going to talk about profound risks and new opportunities. So buckle up. Here we go. What do we mean by the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons? Well, nuclear weapons are a whole nother animal and unlike any other weapon. You start to get the idea when you realize that the power of a nuclear bomb is measured in kilotons. That's thousands of tons of TNT explosive. The good news is PSR has needed to revise our old presentations from the days of that million-person march that Megan was just talking about in the 1980s, because the weapons in modern arsenals are much smaller. The bad news is, well, I'm about to show you the bad news. So in order to do a presentation about more modern weapons, I looked at a report that was written by two researchers in 2007 for the Center for Mass Destruction Defense at the University of Georgia. That's something I'm going to have to look more into. Like, what do they do there exactly? William Bell and Cham Dallas, they mapped out the humanitarian impacts of a 550 kiloton weapon detonated over 4 unlucky American citizens. These researchers chose to study the impacts of a 550 kiloton weapon because the Russian Federation has 568 nuclear weapons that are 500 kilotons or more. So that's a pretty good chunk of their arsenal. Smaller, I'm afraid, when we talk about how the weapons have gotten smaller, that's a relative term. The typical American or Russian nuclear weapon these days is still about 30 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. Since a lot of us have been to New York, when I was trying to figure out which of the 4 cities to concentrate on, I decided we'd look at the data from New York. And maybe they also did Washington, D.C., but I might be just a little bit squeamish about looking at that data too carefully since I'm located here. I'm going to take you on a 4-part tour of the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons: blast, burns, ionizing radiation, and climate disruption. But don't forget that when I'm done with this stuff, we'll be getting into the new opportunities, and that's a lot more hopeful and a lot more cheerful. So the first category that we need to look at is blast. This is the main military utility of a nuclear weapon. They can really smash things really well. Blast is measured in pounds per square inch of overpressure. The Hiroshima bomb that devastated the city in this picture you see was 15 kilotons. Keep in mind the weapon we're about to look at is 550 kilotons. So here's what would happen if you detonated a 550 kiloton weapon near the Empire State Building in New York City. Superimposed on this map are the overpressure rings for blast. So in the first rings, which is sort of a purple color on my screen right in here, this is an area of where heavily built concrete structures will be damaged or demolished, and reinforced concrete buildings will be damaged or demolished all the way out here to this red ring, which stretches completely from the East River to the Hudson. Now, there's these little H symbols. I don't know if you can see them on your screens, but these little blue dots have H's in them. And I'm sad to say that what we're reporting here is where are the hospitals located in New York. And so as you can see, a lot of the hospitals would be completely destroyed. In the pink and yellow bands out here, most of the buildings will survive, but all of the windows that face the detonation will shatter. from the overpressure. And that's why they used to train the school kids to duck and cover. So that's reaching all the way over here in Brooklyn and Queens, and on this side over here into New Jersey, not too far from my birthplace over there. The second category of humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons is burns, and this is what killed most people at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Looking at this from the medical response perspective, which is PSR's perspective on things, right now there's about 1,500 burn beds in the entire United States in every hospital that has one. And only about 150 of those are unoccupied at any given moment. So it's very clear that a nuclear attack on the United States would utterly overwhelm the medical system. So what we do is we map out the thermal energy coming from the bomb, and we measure it in calories per square centimeter. When the bomb goes off, the temperature at ground zero is the same as the sun, about 20 million degrees. For starters, people will suffer burns directly from the bomb. So just beyond the pink ring out here, there's this dark ring, kind of a large ring between the pink and the peach here. That's actually the ring. Everyone who is inside that ring who is caught in the open will suffer third-degree burns. And then the other thing, besides the direct thermal energy from the bomb, is the fires, the indirect casualties that will happen from the fires ignited by the bomb. Everything in the dark red circle in the center, which goes clear across Manhattan from one side to the other and covers about half of Manhattan, everything in there will be consumed by a firestorm. Everything flammable will catch fire. Cloth, paper, gasoline, it will all ignite. All oxygen will be sucked into the fire and nothing can survive. The large massive fires will extend out to what they call the mass fire contour, which is in bright pink. And in a nuclear war, the soot from these fires going up into the stratosphere are the cause of climate disruption, and that's a humanitarian impact we'll get to later. That's a big fire. The third category of humanitarian impact is ionizing radiation. So this is measured in a variety of units, which actually Sister Megan probably knows better than I do. Units such as REMS and sieverts and rads. Ionizing radiation comes in two forms. There's prompt radiation, which is in that first moment after the explosion, emanating out in all directions. Health effects from the prompt radiation extend out at least 3 kilometers for this bomb. Near ground zero, the prompt radiation will be lethal even if you are inside a building, unless you're in the basement. The other form of radiation is the one you've heard of, fallout. You can think Chernobyl or Fukushima. The debris that's sucked up into the mushroom cloud drifts wherever the wind takes it, and then begins to come back to Earth as radioactive fallout. 550 kilotons is a big weapon, and it creates an impressive fallout plume. Looks to me like the prevailing winds come from the west here, and that carries, in this scenario, that carries fallout deep onto Long Island. In Brooklyn and Queens, you've got 90% mortality from the fallout alone. And then it stretches out all the way, about halfway across Long Island. It's still, over here in the green area, that green band, we're still at 50% mortality, halfway across Long Island. And to quote the authors, a staggering number of the main hospitals, trauma centers, and other medical assets are likely to be in the fatality plume, rendering them essentially inoperable in a crisis. And I just want to note that in a real war, New York City would probably be hit by several weapons. And remember that this scenario is only about one city. The U.S. and the Russian Federation each can maintain about 1,500 nuclear weapons ready to go. And even if nuclear weapons are targeted only on military targets like missile bases and air bases or parts of the nuclear weapons complex, cities will be hit by the fallout. Fourth humanitarian impact is the climate impacts. You may recall Carl Sagan was talking about nuclear winter back in the 1980s, and modern computer climate modeling has come a long way since then. We learned a lot about climate disruption actually by looking at what happened when this volcano erupted, the Tambora volcano in Indonesia in 1815. When that happened, it actually had global impacts because of the smoke and the particulate matter that came up from the volcano spread all the way around the world. There was an average of 1.25 degrees Fahrenheit temperature drop. There was a reduction in rain, and even as far away as New England and eastern Canada, there were killing frosts disrupting agriculture in June, July, and August. Any of you who are gardeners know that you can't mess with the growing season without having a big impact on agriculture. It doubled the grain prices around the world. There were deadly famines in Europe. In 2013, PSR and our international affiliate IPPNW published this report using new computer modeling. So what we did is looked at a more likely war scenario than the United States versus Russia. This is India and Pakistan, who often get into conflicts with each other, using 100 Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons targeted on cities. So these are only about 15 kiloton weapons. Each side used 50 in this to create this computer model. In that case, if those cities burned, they'd put 5 million tons of soot into the stratosphere. They would cause the temperature to drop 1.5 degrees Celsius around the world, and there'd be killing frosts in grain-growing areas, especially in the northern hemisphere, and the impacts would last over 10 years. I'll just give you a quick look at this map, and if you look at the breadbasket here in the United States, you can see 1 year after the war, 20 less frost-free days per year in the breadbasket. And you can also see that the agricultural effects spread all the way across the northern hemisphere and some of the southern hemisphere. Well, right now, we already have 800 million people in the world who are chronically malnourished. We cannot handle this sort of disruption to agriculture, and our researchers concluded that up to 2 billion people would be at risk from starving, just from this war between India and Pakistan, a limited regional war with neither the United States or Russia or China involved. Okay, now we can get on to the more exciting part, new opportunities for disarmament, not a minute too soon. With gentle prodding from the International Red Cross, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, Pax Christi International, and others, nations around the world have reawakened to the fact that the arsenals of the 9 nuclear-armed states, over 15,000 weapons between them, with US and Russia owning 94% of them, are putting the citizens of every country at risk. Supposed security for some, which is highly debatable, but for most nations it's nothing but risk. So they've decided to get organized. And they called these conferences. Norway hosted the first one in March of 2013, and 127 nations sent official delegations. This is a Humanitarian Impact of Nuclear Weapons conference to examine these things that I'm talking about. The second conference was in Mexico in February of 2014. 146 nations came to that conference. And then the Austrians hosted the Vienna conference in December of 2014. 158 nations, these are official national delegations, participated, including the United States and Great Britain for the first time. Good for them. A lot of these nations, the non-nuclear weapon states, are aiming towards as Sister Megan referred to, are aiming towards a ban treaty for nuclear weapons. The idea here is that there's a legal gap. Chemical weapons have been prohibited because of indiscriminate effects on civilians. Same for biological weapons. Why on earth wouldn't we prohibit nuclear weapons? If indiscriminate effects on civilians are the reason for banning a weapon, well, nuclear weapons are great candidates. It's time to put them into the dustbin of history. Now, I can just hear you out there, that sounds kind of pie in the sky. But it's not as pie in the sky as you might think. There are large international alliances backing this proposal. For instance, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement has been involved from the get-go, and they passed a 4-year action plan for eliminating nuclear weapons. And that's been adopted by 41 of their national organizations. My parent organization, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, has 62 IPPNW affiliates in nations around the world. Mayors for Peace has called for banning nuclear weapons. 6,900 member cities in Mayors for Peace in 161 countries and regions. And then the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, 424 partner organizations in 95 countries. But that's not all. There's more. You have organizations like the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. We urge all states to commence negotiations on a treaty to ban nuclear weapons at the earliest possible time. That's from their final statement at their December conference in Rome. At the United Nations, 159 nations made a joint statement on humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons in 2015, calling for their total elimination. And let's not forget Pope Francis, who has come out very strongly for eliminating nuclear weapons and delivered a great statement to the Vienna conference in 2014. And he's spoken up several times since then. Right here in the United States, a very mainstream organization indeed is the American Medical Association, but they passed a resolution in June of 2015 urging the U.S. and all national governments to continue to work to ban and eliminate nuclear weapons. And that's, I couldn't help but put in a picture of one of our members testifying there to make that happen. They're actually reaffirming earlier statements against nuclear weapons from the 80s. So we've got the AMA on our side. That's a good thing. And there's the Humanitarian Pledge, which was launched by Austria at the Vienna conference. 127 nations have officially signed on and taken the Humanitarian Pledge. This pledge calls on all states who sign on to identify and pursue effective measures to fill the legal gap. Okay, that's great, but all 127 of those nations do not own nuclear weapons. So what about the nuclear-armed states? That's a problem. And we have our work cut out for us here in the U.S., which owns about half of the world's nuclear weapons. Of course, the nuclear-armed states need to change their policy, but we are making progress, and also we can proceed without them. Let's imagine for a moment that you wanted to get a ban on smoking in a public place, like, for instance, there was a park in your neighborhood, and you wanted to ban smoking in that park. Let's say that you created a petition for that, and you went out looking for supporters. Would you go to the smokers first to sign your petition? Seems like it might make more sense to start with the non-smokers before you start trying to convince the smokers to make it into a public non-smoking area. So now we've come up to the present. Just this last month, various nations put forward humanitarian impact statements and ban treaty statements to the UN at the open-ended working group for disarmament in Geneva. I believe Marie was there. This was also a great opportunity for civil society to speak up, and Pax Christi International delivered an official statement. IPPNW, for its part, joined with 3 other international health federations representing 15 million health professionals around the world in an official joint statement to the UN. This is sort of like all the health professionals standing up and saying, listen to your doctor, nuclear weapons are bad for your health. So the stage has been set, and the United Nations itself will be debating these proposals in October in New York at the General Assembly. We're hoping that meetings to negotiate a nuclear weapons ban treaty will begin next year in 2017. So you see, maybe it's not so pie in the sky after all. So please join in the campaign and help promote a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. Thanks. And I want to point out that there's plenty of materials available at psr.org. And now I'll hand this back to Marie.